As a dynamic senior leader, give me a little compliment up top, right? You know the importance of engaging with your colleagues, customers, and clients. And if you connect the purpose of your mission, then you will build and retain a powerful team and grow your enterprise. But you're frustrated that you're disconnected from your people because your communications are confusing and flat. Therefore, imagine how energized and informed you will become when you listen to Leadership Story Talks. This is a community where you will learn best practices and perspectives from the world's top leaders to help you grow and create the impact you seek, or something like that.
Leadership Story Talks, where we discuss the practices that engage, motivate, develop, retain, and attract people to businesses. We'll give you principles and tools based on real-world stories to leverage listening and storytelling to become a better leader and management professional. Leadership Story Talks is produced by Narativ, a company that focuses on personal storytelling for business.
Welcome to Leadership Story Talks. I'm Jerome DeRoy, CEO of Narativ.
And I'm Julienne B. Ryan, and it's great to be back and meeting our next guest.
Yes, very exciting. So before we move on to introducing our guest, I want to remind our listeners to subscribe to the podcast wherever you find your podcast, leave a review, and also check out our YouTube channel because that's where we also host these podcasts. So you can see us in video form. And you'll find a lot of information in the episode's notes as well as on narativ.com, narativ.com/podcast, where you can find all of our previous episodes as well. So now, without further ado, I want to welcome our guest, Park Howell, who is known as the world's most industrious storyteller, having grown purpose-driven brands by as much as 600%. He's an Emmy Award-winning 35-plus year veteran of the advertising industry and hosts the popular weekly Business of Story podcast, author of Brand Bewitchery, and co-authored The Narativ Gym for Business. He's sought after internationally to help leaders excel through the stories they tell. Welcome to the show, Park.
Jerome, Julienne, so great being with you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
of
you.
course. And it's so great, I have to say, to have a fellow, storyteller here, and really I'm excited to learn more about what you do and how you do it. So maybe we'll start there. How did you come to embrace storytelling in your work?
It was to get out of a major hole. I had a problem, and that problem was I was running my ad agency, Park & Co. in Phoenix, Arizona, which I launched in 1995. And we were traditional ad agency back then, TV, radio, print, outdoor, direct mail, all that kind of fun stuff. And it was very creative, and it was filled with storytelling, whether we knew it or not. And then, let's jump ahead to the early 2000 aughts. And of course, the interwebs take over. E-commerce, websites, social media, and where our brands, our clients used to own the influence of mass media. Well, of course, as we all know now, the masses have become the media, and I was simply looking for a way to stand out. The branding work we had done previous to that, the same methods just weren't working. The advertising just wasn't working. And this was right about the time, early 2000s, 2002, where the term story started bubbling up in our vernacular. And I was kind of like, well, duh. I mean, that's what we all do. But then I realized that we weren't always doing it. We were intuitive. And I realized that we needed to become intentional. And that was for one reason. And that is to stand out in this noisy, cacophonous world we've got. So I started doing some studying, first with Hollywood. Our son Parker went to Chapman University's film school, 2006, 2010. And while he was going there, I said, send me your books and send me your recorded lectures when you're done with them, since I'm paying for them, because I want to know, what does Hollywood know about storytelling that we should probably be using in sales and marketing? And that's where it all began.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so what did that sort of open your eyes to once you started studying, and how did that sort of become what it is today?
Yeah, it really moved me from being an intuitive storyteller, as we all are as Homo sapiens, into becoming intentional. And what
Mm.
really woke me up to it was a campaign we ran for Goodwill of Central Arizona just prior to my studying this stuff. And we had two 30-second TV spots. One of them pulled extremely well. I mean, same day store sales went up 42% the next month. And then the other one we ran in the campaign, bupkis, did nothing. And I went and I looked at them. And before I studied story, I was like, well, why does this one work? And why is this one an utter failure? Well, it turned out this one actually had a story structure of setup, problem, resolution to it, told a story intuitively. The other one was just a creative mashup of, gee, aren't we so clever and cute as your ad agency? We're going to win lots of awards with this. And by the way, it moved the needle zero. So that's when I realized, well, this doesn't have a story structure to it. It's just like, what does it mean? What am I supposed to mean? And interestingly enough, we won an Emmy for the first spot in that campaign that told a story. So that's when I'm like, okay, got to get my act together and really understand how these frameworks work.
Wow, amazing.
So you used a couple of our favorite words was intentional, and then learning from our mistakes and failures, which is a big call to action on any given day. It informs a lot of our backstories. So, okay,
well, that's
Jerome,
where we all learn, right? It's our trials and
yeah.
tribulations, and like, okay, that didn't work.
Yeah, totally. And it's a very kind of organic way, it sounds like, of getting to where, you were starting with where your clients were essentially. You're noticing that there's something you're doing that's not working, or customers aren't responding to it, or consumers aren't responding to it. So what else can we do here? And as is often the case, what we've found as well is that it's often hiding in plain sight. I mean, you already knew the business of story, you were doing it intuitively, but it was a matter of making it more intentional. And maybe on that note, Park, you could tell us a little bit more about that particular framework, that allowed you to become more intentional, more formal about storytelling.
Well, and I'm going to go from complex to simple, because that is what stories do. I learned the complex structure of the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's 12 to 17 step monomyth, however many steps you want to throw in there. There are a lot of them. And I learned them at Chapman University. And the first time I saw it, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, this is a customer journey. This is a brand journey. This is the journey that we all go through. So that's where I mapped it to business and created my 10-step story cycle system. Tried to simplify it a little bit, but definitely wanted to speak to that logic, rational driven business CEO who would maybe say, oh, that Hollywood woo-woo stuff, that ain't going to work here. But I first tried it out on a company called Clinica Adelante, a local community healthcare center here, and they were in real trouble. And so we went in, and it was literally, I mean, a science project. In my heart, I thought this was going to work, but I wasn't sure. And they were so open to go through it, took them through it. We so clarified their story that they grew by 600% over the next 8 years. It was so dialed in, they did no advertising, no PR, and they attracted in the doctors they were looking for, the customers they were looking for, primarily because they got that story pulled together and they learned how to tell it. That's when I'm like, okay, onto something here. How do we take it even deeper? And so I started training on the story cycle system. It's complex, but in my journey, I learned about the 5 primal elements of a short story, and ultimately what led me to the 3 words of and, but, therefore, the ABT framework. And so now all of my training begins with the foundation of the and, but, therefore, and then we build on it from there.
Wow, that's great. It's really fascinating because you mentioned this earlier too, that in the early 2000s, roughly, the word story was being used more and more. And now and at that time we were starting to see it in business more and more. And I think now it's become really kind of part of the vernacular. There's no, I mean, I remember when I first started, around the same time, actually, people were kind of scratching their heads a little bit when I'd go into corporations and tell them about storytelling. And I think that work that you did essentially of translating those things that are out there, starting with Joseph Campbell, and now there's many other things that are easily accessible to everyone and that are free probably online about story structure, etc. But that work of translation, that's something that really resonates with me, and that's my term, translating it from complex to simple. And now you've got a very simple framework, it sounds like, of the ABT. I'm curious what kind of so that was my first point, was the need to translate something, and maybe get your thoughts on that. But why do you think that is? Why do you think that there is a need to sort of take something that's been out there arguably for millennia, right? Storytelling, it's how we communicate, etc., and how we understand things. It's our entertainment, it's everywhere. And so why do you think there's that need to sort of take that and make it even simpler for businesses, corporates, executives?
Well, first and foremost, you're right. I invented none of this. I was inspired by it. I could see how we could use it with great intention in business communications, leadership, sales, marketing, HR, whatever. And then I looked around and realized nobody was doing it. We weren't even doing it as an ad agency. We were doing good work and we were helping our clients, but I realized we were winging it half the time. And I always say, let's move from winging it to winning it every time by using these frameworks. And I think what has happened, especially in the B2B world, everyone thinks of business to business. I call it boring to bored, because we're always leading with our logic, reason-driven brain, when that Homo sapien, that storytelling ape sitting across from you, the limbic survival brain, wants setup, problem, resolution. It doesn't want to be confused. It actually doesn't want to think. It's just spoon feed the meaning you want me to take away. And there's only one technology that can do that for you, and that is the technology of storytelling. And I call it a technology because it absolutely has an algorithm, to a proven algorithm, the framework of the and, but, therefore, the framework of the 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact, which is just an expanded ABT. The framework of the 10-step story cycle system, which is also built upon the ABT. So it's that, I call it the applied science and bewitchery of storytelling. If you are going to get the attention and then move, now let's say, excite your audiences to action, there is no bullet pointed list that's going to do that. No features and functions that's going to do that. No banal TikTok video that's going to do that. It comes down to that structure of how our pattern-seeking, problem-solving, decision-making, buying limbic brain wants to get information. And so I just took it, translated it into the business world, and say, here's what we're missing out on, the number one skill that most of you aren't using. And I mean, we got great ROI on it too, that will blow your mind of just how powerful it is.
This rings a bell, and already I'm going back in time, because I backed into storytelling. Did I love stories? Did I use metaphors in my language naturally? When I was doing human resources work, and my goal is, I had a problem. I didn't have a budget most of the time, and I needed to get people to listen and hopefully not get us sued or spend more time getting in trouble and making our lawyers rich out, building their koi ponds in their estates. So I would use storytelling in recruiting situations and tell something about my background, share it, and get them to confess things that went wrong, and it bonded. And then in HR, when we had tough conversations, to get them to sit so we could listen and do something. And I didn't know that was important till way later on, and then started to study, and it worked. And it did. So every leader who's sitting there going, oh, this is so fussy, fluffy, it's not. It built trust. And what you're explaining really does bring it down to a whole other level. It works all the time.
It is kind of crazy how it works. I'd say you've got to understand the magic if you're going to cast the spell. And the magic comes in first, starting with that and, but, therefore. And people will first say, Park, it's just 3 words. Can it possibly work? And I say, all right, A/B test it. Write what you would normally write for, say, a LinkedIn post, and then rewrite it using an and, but, therefore framework. Post both of them within a day of each other and see which one gets more engagement. And it always wins out with the ABT, because it's just the way our brain wants to receive information and not have to work for it. So taking complex to simple.
Hmm. So I'd love to hear from you an example of an ABT, or what is meant by and but therefore,
Oh,
just so our
okay.
listeners can kind of understand what that
Absolutely. So
is.
three parts. The and but therefore uses the three forces of story. Those are agreement, act
Mm.
one, the setup, setting the stage, contradiction, act two. Oh my God, we're in peril. What's going on? There's major change afoot. What's going to happen that leads to act three, or consequence? So agreement, contradiction, and consequence. And like I was doing a training with the Home Depot, and one guy asked me their internal sales teams to vendors and so forth. And he asked me, he goes, Park, what's the shortest ABT you know? And I go, oh, it's just 10 words. You communicate and care, but bore. Therefore, tell a story.
Mm.
Setup, problem, resolution. Now, that is not a story in and of itself, because we don't actually have a character and a time, place, and so forth. That's where the five primal elements of a short story or an anecdote comes in. But that little message works because we have agreement. You communicate and care. Yes, I do. I really do communicate and care. But hate to tell you, you bore, especially in the B2B world. Because they're logic driven, executives. Therefore, tell a story. Now you can add to that, therefore, to truly connect on a deep, visceral level with your audience, customer, prospects, share a story that they can relate to. I mean, you could then start expanding on it. But what I've done in telling that is just getting into that limbic brain of setup, problem, resolution. So that's how you use it. And then you can use it everywhere. Email writing, focusing your presentations or whatever. What I like to do, if you two are up for it, is kind of fun, is let's do an ABT brand for your show right now. And I'm going to walk you through it. So all of your viewers and listeners, get a notepad down, because here's exactly how you do it. Are you guys up for it?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So we're going to do some soul searching here. I want to know and write down, and in fact, I'm going to write down as we go so I stay on top of this. Who by persona is your number one audience for this show? I know you appeal to a lot of people, but who are those 80% that make up that number one persona?
Okay. Do you want us to respond or write it down?
Yes.
Yeah. You're in the hot seat right now, Jerome.
We have to model what we preach.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say senior leaders.
Julienne?
I agree. And we also have a second cohort that we're appealing to, up and coming professionals that are looking for lessons in engagement and learning.
What do those two audiences have in common? Senior leaders and up and coming professionals.
Yeah, I would say the word that comes to my mind that they have in common is that they're looking to engage. Like they're getting more and more seniority. Their teams are getting bigger, and so they really need to engage their audiences, whether it's internal teams or actual customers, stakeholders. Some of them might now be newly having to talk to investors and that sort of thing. So I would say that's the word that keeps coming to my mind is they got to engage people. They got to know how to do that.
I think on the up and coming professionals, they're looking for their work to mean something and have a direction, and looking for much more control or expectations than prior generations did. It has to be a bigger purpose and meaning for their work.
Bigger purpose and meaning. Okay. And a lot of these senior leaders are talking to those up and coming professionals too. So they got to train them up. So we'll focus right now on the senior leader as that number one audience. All right. And why is it important for them to engage their people? I know it sounds like kind of an obvious question, but I would really like to get it. What are they really trying to accomplish with that engagement?
I mean, I think they're trying to ultimately, get better, improve their business, make a contribution, make an impact on their customers so that they keep coming back, essentially. And same with their employees. They want to keep everybody happy and engaged so that they stay with them, they retain their teams, and they attract new team members as they grow.
And make money.
And make money. Yeah. All of this leads to making money. That's for sure.
Okay. Now I'm just feverishly Writing this down. All right. What is the problem that they have that is keeping them from engaging that you are ultimately going to solve? I don't want the solution yet. What is the problem? But they're frustrated. They're not engaging because of what?
Hmm. I mean, for me, I'm sure, Julian, you've got something to add to this, but what we see all the time, between our guests and people who give us feedback in our work, they have a wealth of data, and that helps them a lot. But it's also a curse because it's really hard to communicate in simple terms to engage those teams and those customers with such complex data. So that's what I see a lot is that a lot of time their communications kind of fall flat, and they have the vision, they see it out there, they know how to get there, but they're like 3 steps ahead of everybody else, and they don't know how to bridge that gap for everybody else so they can see it too.
Gotcha.
But I also think there's once you get to a point of view as leaders, you're also a little disconnected from the general population, and you don't get information fed up to you, sometimes truthfully or in the way you can. So you can you don't know what you don't know, basically. And surveys don't cut it, let me tell you. And
Yeah.
we can do a little bit of walk around all these other great data collection situations, but there's always that, do I know everything I need to be knowing, and connecting with my audience, not my audience, but it is your audience, your employees.
All right. Then we're going to move on to the final one. We've got our agreement, we've got our contradiction, and the consequence. How are you or this show uniquely equipped to help them get it? What are they going to take away from your show that is going to help them connect with their people and keep their communications from falling flat?
I would say the number one thing that they get is our best practices, from a variety of professionals like yourself and many others that they wouldn't normally have access to within their company necessarily, because these are offering different perspectives. And so I think pulling those best practices exactly to, okay, so my communications are kind of falling flat. Let me go to this show and hear what Park has to say about the ABT model. Maybe I can use that, and maybe that'll make it resonate more, right? Or you could say that of any episode, right? That's just an example, but I think that's one of the ways that we provide solutions is that, there's very practical tips. We're not just talking theory here.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is we use words in our society, engage, and we pander. I think the show built community, and it also shows that engagement is multidimensional. It's not just one thing. It's a lot of different things. So think about a diamond, a multifaceted diamond. You have all these different dimensions creating this piece.
Yeah.
All right. And then the final question I have.
I feel like I'm back in graduate school, by the way.
This is great, but this is the best way to prove it out, because I'm sure you got a lot of listeners, a lot of viewers right now saying, oh, come on, Park, this is BS. This thing can't work. But I'm going to show you. So my last question, how are your listeners, the senior leaders, going to feel when they get this, when they get leveled up? What is it? A relief? Is it optimism? What are they going to feel?
The word that comes to my mind is energized. It's, that energy that you feel when you have discovered something that you didn't know before, and that you feel like, and you've got the confidence. I think those are the two things: energized and confident to actually use these things that we're talking about on this show.
Okay.
And informed.
And informed.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So
my theory is always expect the unexpected in our podcast too.
Yeah.
It's never business as usual.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It sort of mirrors, I think everything we've talked about sort of mirrors, at least I'll speak for me, what I feel, right? So whenever I talk to a guest, this is how I feel. There's something I'm discovering in the moment, even though we've prepped for this. And so as a result, it energizes me. It makes me more confident and informed, right? Yeah. So it's kind of interesting.
All right, so here we go. Now, this is literally just a rough draft that we've pulled together in 5 minutes. This is the way it works. Anybody can do this. Do it for yourself. and then you can start fine tuning it. So here are the steps. You want to identify your number one audience. You did in this case with senior leaders. I know you've got that secondary audience, but I think what we'll say here will relate to them too. What do they want relative to your offering? They don't even maybe realize what your offering is yet. You do, because you've done your discovery. What do they want? And why is that important to them? You want to raise the stakes. That is your statement of agreement, because all you're trying to do is get your prospects nodding yes. Yep, understand me. You appreciate what I want. That's cool. And then you introduce the problem you're going to be solving for, because nobody buys a solution without a problem, right? So you have your but, and I want you to follow that but with an emotion, and then use the conjunction word because. That cause and effect really plays to the limbic brain, and it enables you to what I call find the hurt and then amplify that pain, because you're ultimately going to heal the wound in your therefore statement of consequence. But you're not going to lead with your brand directly after the therefore. You want to keep it focused on your audience. They are always at the center of your story. What's in it for them? Then at the very back end of your therefore, you have to fight off all those demons of saying, we got to be talking about us. This is where you actually get to talk about yourself. You're at the very end of this. And remember, these things can be 15 seconds or less. So all you're doing is setting this problem solution dynamic stage in your audience's limbic brain. So they go, oh yeah, totally get that. Wow. Okay. That's for me. I'm going to tune in. All right. So I wrote something down like this. And you're speaking, by the way, you're going to do a pronoun shift. You're not going to be talking about you, as in you all. You are going to be talking about you, your audience. So we want to do the pronoun shift from the story being about us to being about them. The single most powerful word to do that is the word you, of course, right? So as a dynamic senior leader, you'll give him a little compliment up top, right? You know the importance of engaging with your colleagues, customers, and clients. And if you connect the purpose of your mission, then you will build and retain a powerful team and grow your enterprise. But you're frustrated that you're disconnected from your people because your communications are confusing and flat. There's so much to take in. Therefore, imagine how energized and informed you will become when you listen to leadership story talks. This is a community where you will learn best practices and perspectives from the world's top leaders to help you grow and create the impact you seek, or something like that. Well, there you go. So again, I just kind of knotted this down real quick, and your idea is to go in and clean it up. Senior leader, you want to engage. It's important to attract and retain top talent and grow your purpose-driven brand, but you're frustrated you're not currently engaging because your communications are falling flat due to complexity, data, and whatever. Therefore, imagine energizing your knowledge base with world leaders in business through your story, of podcasts and so forth. Setup, problem resolution.
And what you also brought into focus here, because a lot of time when we're working with folks, we're so close to something that we forget to talk about it. And when we talk to all these leaders, at the core of every problem I've ever encountered, every problem that Jerome's encountered in the work, it's about the lack of listening. And simple listening that goes into every situation. People have tuned out, haven't paid attention, etc. So listening is the driving force of this work.
Well, Julienne, to that point, we're talking about the ABT as a narrative framework. That's what everyone's first really interested in. How do I get my messages to land right the first time, every time? It's also a remarkable story listening tool. And here's how that works. So once you really practice the ABT and understand it, you build your narrative intuition when you are sitting across from a colleague. And we've all been there. They're so frustrated. They have this big problem. They just verbally vomit on you for 10 minutes. And they go on and on and on and on. And you listen very patiently. When they finally wear themselves out and take a breath, you say, oh, Julienne, here's what I heard you say. And then you repeat it back to them using the ABT. You and your team want this, and it's really important to you because of this. But you're extraordinarily frustrated or fearful or whatever. because of this major problem here. Therefore, we need to look for a fix. Maybe it's down here. That just opens up the conversation. And then what happens is they'll first look at you like, what sort of Svengali are you? Because they'll say, geez, you actually said that better than I did. Thank you for listening. And then sometimes what comes out of that is, gee, Julienne, you said that so well. I realized I forgot to tell you one other thing. And it's always that one other thing that is the true core of the problem. So it is a fabulous story listening tool.
Yeah. It's interesting. It really is that you're creating that virtuous cycle that we talk about a lot too, where you hear a story, or it doesn't even have to be a story as long as it's in that framework that the mind kind of understands naturally, then that makes me listen in a certain way, and it's engaging my brain in such a way that I'm remembering things that are really important. And now I'm going to say those things to you, and then you're going to take that in. That's information for you, and so on and so forth. And it just goes on and on and on. So now we're really in this kind of knowledge transfer, essentially, system that seems to be very productive. Yeah.
You've created a dialogue instead of you talking at the person, giving them the pitch and the sell. It's a dialogue, it's a give and take. So there's flow, like music, that you have beats and you come back to that person and showing how you're listening. So it's interesting. It's all very interesting and connected.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Park, for taking us through that, because you're right. So many times we can talk about things kind of theoretically, or even with great examples. And you've talked about the impact of this work, and how enterprises that you've worked with have grown as a result, or had much better results. And one thing I'm curious about, having gone through this exercise with you, how does AI factor into this, or into your work, if at all?
Yeah. Well, we have been working on 2 custom chat GPTs, one for the and, but, therefore, and actually one for the 10-step story cycle system. The thinking is to make the story cycle work. Of course, you got to do a lot of due diligence, a lot of discovery as you're reframing your brand story or creating it from scratch. That takes a lot of time and effort. We are working with ChatGPT to do the research. We call it our storytelling intern, because it's like, okay, go and do all this research so that you can show us how we are being, relatable in the marketplace, competition and whatever, and drop it into the 10 steps so that we can go back and review it. Then you go in and you do your work, your human work of now bringing humanity to your brand through the stories and the words you use it and how you describe that. And it's been fairly successful. We're still running it a lot and doing a lot of tests. We're getting there. We also have one on the ABT. It can get the basic form down of and, but, therefore, to get you started. But then it really takes, again, that Homo sapien in you, that human in you, to come and bring your voice to it and so forth. But because they're algorithms, AI is helpful in research and in like creating first drafts. But then it's really up to you to go and dial that in.
You're using a great word, the humanity into, or the humanness into it, because I gave a recent talk to an audience that was there to visit at a conference. They were there to discuss AI and technology and ChatGPT, and I wasn't there to dismiss it, but I was saying there is a relationship. They still have to practice their human skills and, take some risks of how they're interacting and be critical thinkers, as they're progressing, not just,
I think about being on the bridge of the USS Enterprise, and who would you rather hear a story from, Spock or Captain Kirk? Who's actually going to move that audience, Spock or Captain Kirk? So I think of Spock as AI. He gives you all that logic, reason,
great
insight.
metaphor.
But then it comes to Captain Kirk to bring the humanity to it. I think we all need to be Captain Kirks.
Yeah. And to see the value and need for Spock's, right? So
exactly
that helps the Captain Kirk, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. So there's a question that we ask of all of our guests, and we're getting to that time now. And so here's the question. So what is an experience that you could tell us about that has shaped who you are today, still influences you or informs your kind of decision making?
Oh gosh, I was about 5 years old, and we were visiting our grandpa and grandma, Clint and Mabel Howell in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. I grew up in Seattle, so my mom and dad would load us 7 kids up in the station wagon, and
Wow.
off we would drive across
God bless
the
them.
country. Yeah, and we rolled in on Lake Lida. They had a cute little red kind of cottage home there and a big sleeping bay outside for all of us youngsters. And one day I went in and my grandma was 100% Mabel Torfin, 100% Norwegian, big smile all the time, that real fair complected, white hair. And she was always scurrying around. She sits down at the piano, and I'm not even sure I knew what a piano was at that point. I thought like she was just sitting down to a cupboard, and she starts playing this most amazing ragtime tune. And she's just bouncing back and forth, smiling and giggling. And I sat there completely mesmerized. And I turned and looked at my mom and dad and said, I want to be able to do that. So a few years later, they actually bought a little Kimball spinnet piano. I started studying music, playing music at, well, 3rd grade, I guess it was. And I started writing songs. I wrote songs. I ended up going in and getting a degree in music composition and theory, and never realized that after all these years. I figured I couldn't make any money of that. So I also got a degree in advertising and public relations, and I've applied the music training into the advertising world that I, had built my whole career around. But what I think is so interesting is now fast forward to today, and what I do is coach and teach storytelling, composition, and theory for businesses. So it's all come together, and it literally started when I was that little boy listening to his Norwegian grandma play a little bit of piano in Lake Lida, Minnesota.
Amazing.
Wow. That's
Amazing.
a great story.
Yeah, it is a great story and very vivid. I can picture the grandmother, and I can picture the piano, and you at 5 years old in the station wagon and all these things. Just again, a testament to the power of storytelling, right? When we're following all these.
I use the 5 primal elements of a short story that I teach too in that. I gave you a time stamp. I was roughly 5 years old. I gave you a location stamp, Lake Lida, Minnesota. In this case, there's a central character, my grandmother, but I'm also kind of the character because of what she did. But I want you to get focused on just my grandmother playing the piano. And then the action is I start taking piano lessons. The surprise is I go so far as getting a degree in music composition and theory, and now apply a lot of that knowledge in how I teach storytelling, composition, and theory. So that becomes the aha moment. So there are the 5 primal elements of a short story, which is literally just an expanded ABT.
Yeah, absolutely. Listeners, you just got a masterclass here from
know.
Park Howell and the business of story. I feel very, very fortunate. Thank you
Honored.
so
I
much.
know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so
You know,
much.
Jerome, I would be remiss if I didn't mention your business partner there, Murray Nossel, who came on my podcast, show number 158. We're up to show 464. So
Wow.
it was a while
Congrats.
back. But he was the first one to come on and talk about the importance of story listening. Up to that point, everybody else was talking about storytelling, and it was one of my most popular shows because it took a very interesting look at it. And he got me to be thinking more about story listening. And it was a year or two after that, I came across the ABT, and I go, well, here's a great device to do that with. So hats off to Murray. And if you want to listen to that show, it's 158 on the business of story.
Great. Absolutely. On that note, actually, this is a perfect transition. I was going to ask you, Park, if you've got any last words or recommendations or things you would want our listeners to do following this episode or go to.
Yeah, I mean, if they would like to really study the ABT themselves, I've got a micro training course on it called you go to businessofstory.com/ABT. It's a Thinkific. It's a 1-hour course, 3 modules. It'll walk you through how to use the whole ABT program. That's probably their best go-to, or if you want to take a deeper dive, listen to episode 400 of my podcast, where I walk through my 10-year experience of learning the ABT and then bring in lots of different guests who are using it in lots of different industries and the success they're having with it. So those might be the 2 areas I'd send them.
Fantastic. Well, we will also make lots of notes in our episode notes here for listeners so that we make sure they know where to find you, how to find you, and where to learn more. And I want to remind our listeners that, once again, if you've been inspired by by this particular episode, you can also consider enrolling yourself and or your team in our group and one-on-one training programs that focus on finding, crafting, and telling stories and listening skills, as we talked about. For leadership development, sales, team building, and employee engagement, you can go to narativ.com, narativ.com to enroll. We're always ready to listen. And please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a review, because that's what drives word of mouth on your favorite podcast platform. And remember that we also have a YouTube channel where you can see us in more than one dimension.
Faces.
That's right, exactly. Exactly. Well, I want to thank you once again, Park Howell. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's been really illuminating and a treat. So thanks for being here.
Well, thank you. It's an honor.
Yeah. And thanks, Julienne, as always, for co-hosting with me. It's such a pleasure.
This is a treat. I'm always excited. So
yeah. All righty. Well, goodbye, everybody. And we will see you next time. Thanks so much for listening.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narativ.com.